Proposition 128 is a ballot measure that would allow lawmakers to amend or repeal voter-approved measures under certain situations. Joining us now for debate on Prop 128 is Scott Musi, president of the Arizona Free Enterprise Club, and Roy Tatum Jr. of the NAACP's East Valley branch. Good to have you both here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Scott, we'll talk about, we'll start with you, I should say. Prop 128, why is this a good thing?
Well, Prop 128 is designed to deal with narrow circumstances where voter-approved measures or initiatives are found to contain illegal or unconstitutional language. Right now, there's no mechanism in place if a measure is found to contain illegal or unconstitutional language, absent trying to perhaps maybe go back to the voters, which could cost a lot of money, and also isn't a way to additionally address it on a more immediate fashion. It could be years before potentially doing that. And so, given the current situation where a measure goes before the Arizona or United States Supreme Court, and those are the only two instances in which this would come into effect, in those instances, if the court finds that there is language that is illegal or unconstitutional, then there would be at least a mechanism in place to address that.
Okay, why is this not such a great idea?
This isn't a great idea because as a ballot measure allows the people, there are two ways to make a law here in Arizona. One is for a legislator to propose a bill. The bill goes to committee, is voted up or down, signed by the governor. Another way to make a law is the introduction of a ballot measure, which means we're going to take an issue to the people. And so the people in Arizona have the ability to say they want this particular issue to be a law of the land. And so it's pretty much, to me, it's democracy, a huge apparatus of democracy and a pure execution of democracy because it's a people-driven initiative.
Okay, how do you respond to that?
Well, I don't think this is an attack on the initiative process as well. In fact, our organization has been active participants in the initiative process. This is about dealing with those situations where something's illegal or unconstitutional is found by the Arizona or United States Supreme Court. And I think in those, what we're talking about as far as, making sure people are being heard, I think most voters, a lot of times in often cases don't know or are unaware that the language could be illegal or unconstitutional and it could impact their thinking on the measure itself. However, there's no mechanism to deal with that because prior to something passing, voters simply wouldn't know that it contains illegal or unconstitutional language.
Is it limited specifically and narrowly to illegal or unconstitutional language?
To the measures themselves. So
yes.
The initiative itself, if it contains illegal or unconstitutional language, and those would be the only measures it would apply to.
Okay, but the measure as a whole, let's say this is the illegal part, but the rest of this is not. This is the only thing affected, or is the entire measure affected?
The entire measure would be encapsulated in that because it's difficult to say, well, this one portion over here doesn't apply to all of it. I mean, it's usually measures don't operate that way. If it's statutory language, a lot of it's going to be interrelated. So in those situations, again, with those type of measures, that's what it would deal with.
Why shouldn't lawmakers, if something is unconstitutional, if something was illegal or just clumsily written, it's headed for the courts, and the whole ballot measure is going to be held up anyway, why shouldn't the legislature be allowed to go in there and tinker and get it right? This
is where things get tricky because as we talk about the state legislature, just this past legislative session, we've witnessed over 100 pieces of voter suppression legislation. And some of them are even addressing the existence of a ballot measure. And therefore, measures such as the Arizona Fair Elections Act ballot initiative was created to address the attempts to curb people from voting. And I mean, to go back even further, let's talk about the 2020 election and where we're talking about the Stop the Steal rally cry. Unfortunately, I believe that this is a measure to give the power to the legislators to overturn the will of the people. And so if a ballot measure passes, they can, nitpick or try to overturn the ballot measure just because of a sentence, because of a word. And that is truly undermining the will of the voters.
But if it keeps that ballot measure from being struck down, is that not a good thing?
No, I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing at all because once again, I believe this is you give an inch, they'll take a mile.
Well, and that's again the question of how much is affected. This, from what I understand, the measure could be entirely rewritten by lawmakers if this were to go through. Correct?
Well, under the measure itself, yeah, what you're describing there, if it's found to contain illegal or unconstitutional language, they could look to amend it. The extent of that amending would be up to the elected representatives. You are correct on that. But again, I don't think this is an attack on the initiative process. In fact, I think that it ensures that it's upheld because right now there is no mechanism in place to deal with these situations.
It's too ambiguous to say the language is illegal or unconstitutional. I mean, now we're dealing with a situation where women's rights to choose are being deemed unconstitutional. Certain books now are being banned in schools and being deemed illegal. And so to use the language illegal and unconstitutional I think, is a code word. I don't believe that is the true nature of this initiative.
Yeah, well, and what's being described there, it wouldn't be us saying that it's illegal or unconstitutional, or you. It would be the United States Supreme Court or the Arizona Supreme Court making that determination.
Okay, if the court does make that determination, whichever court it might be, why not let the courts do what they got to do as opposed to sending it back to the legislature who could rewrite and redirect the entire process?
Well, because in a lot of those situations, you might see a situation where they do try to go in and they strike down a certain provision, but it could render the rest of the initiative dysfunctional or inoperative. The court may or may not know how to fix or remedy that situation.
If the patient dies because it has to go to court and get fixed, I mean, is it not better to have at least some surgery done by the legislature?
Well, if that legislature was trustworthy. Once again, I stated, we've seen the legislature introduce, or members of the legislature introduce over 100 pieces of voter suppression legislation. One legislator specifically saying that he wanted to take voting back to 1958, which sent alarms through the community because many people that look like me, many women, were not even eligible to vote in 1958. So that sent a alarming message about the attitude towards we the people in allowing everyone to participate in the electoral process.
It sounds like Arizona and California are really the only states that prohibit this kind of alteration by state legislatures. They've got like 11 of 21 states have no such restrictions, and you see this happening around the country in other states. Again, a bad thing for Arizona?
Bad thing for Arizona because of the nature of the legislature. Once again, I just believe that as we're talking, we're seeing legislators say that they were willing to overturn the will of the voters during the 2020 election. As the electoral votes, as we talk about the Electoral College, Joe Biden won Arizona's electoral votes. There were legislators saying that they were willing to overturn the will of the people if the legislature had that power to do so.
Why should the legislature be involved with this at all when it wasn't involved with this in the first place?
As far as dealing with these types of measures that...
If a ballot measure, makes the cockatoo the state bird and the legislature had nothing to do with it, why should the legislature all of a sudden get involved?
Well, because there's been no mechanism, and we've seen actually in the last couple cycles where there have been groups, sometimes from out of state, that put a lot of money into Arizona to promote these ballot measures, but hire paid circulators to do so. And they will often knowingly include illegal or unconstitutional language in their measure. And it's flagged for them, often it's pointed out, and they include that language anyway. And the reality is on the front end, before an initiative is approved, there's no mechanism to address those situations. How do you fix illegal or unconstitutional language before it even goes in front of the voters? This is only dealing with those narrow circumstances where it contains that language. Most measures are found to not contain illegal or constitutional measures. It would not be impacted. And
yeah, but critics say it's not narrow. Critics say that initially the idea was to be narrow, but the way it is written, the whole thing can be wiped out and changed. That's not true?
We don't believe it's broad like that. We believe that it doesn't really infringe on the initiative process at all. Again, when you're talking about these situations, we don't believe voters would approve measures that contained illegal or unconstitutional language if aware of it. The problem is that there's no mechanism on the front end to remedy that situation, and then there's no way to fix it if a court does strike it down.
Okay, last point here, last word here. It's a narrow amendment, basically a narrow amendment to the Voter Protection Act.
He just said that it's slim to none, that this issue is very small. So why go through this proposition? Why adapt this proposition to address such a small issue? And so this is overreach, and it will give the legislature way too much power to override the will of the people. And that's where many of our community organizations stand that promote ballot measures, that promote election protection, true election integrity, and support the election practices here in Arizona. And so we've had an amazing voter process and turnout over the last couple of legislative sessions. No need to change.
Got to stop you right there. Gentlemen,
All right.
Good debate, good discussion. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.